Fabulous. Well, welcome everyone. We are so thrilled to host our fourth quarter and final 2026 BirchBark education webinar of our education webinar series. I am the executive director, Megan French, here of BirchBark. Really honored to introduce first our founder, Dr. Marianne Birch, who will say a few words in just a moment, and our host today, Rebecca Lane. She has all kinds of letters after her name, including a UW-AAB, a CSAP-BC, an CFDM, and a KAD-AP. And I will let her go ahead and introduce herself after our introductions here and kind of explain what she does. And we're so thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for being here. I'll just keep this very short and do a couple of housekeeping notes. We do send out a survey after our webinars. It's exceptionally helpful for us, and we have three folks that we will choose to do a few giveaways after this. We've got some BirchBark shirts, and we also have a BirchBark calendar. You are welcome to ask questions through the webinar. If you want to go ahead and put them in the chat, Marianne and one of our co-panelists will go ahead and track those, and we'll have a section for Q&A at the very end that Rebecca will go ahead and do. And I would love to remind folks that our webinar program and series is absolutely free to the public. Please tell your friends, please tell anyone who's interested in learning more about our education series to be more of an advocate for your pets. All of our webinars are recorded and then uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you can't catch this, or if someone was interested but couldn't come, please refer them to our YouTube channel for this and other education series we have there. And let's see, I think that that's all I have to share. I'm going to pass along to Dr. Marianne Birch, our founder and board president, for a few words on our program, and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Megan. I'm Dr. Marianne Birch. Many of you may know me and my closet in the background and my cat that might zoom in the middle. But I wanted to say that anyone who doesn't know about BirchBark and what we do here is that we have three main programs that the foundation runs. The Pet Aid program, which helps low-income people be able to afford medical care for their pets. And that's been growing in the Central Coast area. We serve the Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito County. I'm very proud of that we have a new senior pet aid program. And we have saved many lives, which was the goal and the heartfelt intention when it was started. The second part of our program is grief support. So having people with experience leading counseling groups for people who are going through the transition of losing a pet before, during, and after that situation. And then also the education webinars, because part of what we want to do is make sure that people who have pets can be the best advocates for their pets. So learning what's available in the medical field, learning how to address behavior problems, and really doing the best they can to advocate for happiness with their pet and the relationship with their pet. And that's part of the goal of these webinars. And I learn something every time. Behavior is an area that I am not fantastic at, if any of you've met my pets, but it is an area that I think is essential for many pets to have a happy life. So I'm really looking forward to what Rebecca has to share with us about separation anxiety, which is very common when those of us are out there rescuing pets from basically shelters or sometimes a traumatic beginning. So
Lastly, thanks so much, Marianne. Lastly, I also want to add, if you would like to make a donation today to support our education series, you can go to our website, birchbarkfoundation.org, and there's a button there on how to give us a donation to support more of the programs that we do.
and questions can go either in the chat or the Q&A. We'll look in both places for you. So without further ado, we're going to say welcome, Rebecca, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. So I would share my screen on this end, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did everybody see my screen? Okay, so I'm here today to talk about canine separation anxiety and a couple of other things that you'll see as I get further into the presentation. So a little bit about me. How did I get here? In 2014, I adopted a dog named Wyatt from Shadows Fund, which is a Southern California rescue. And at that time, I didn't know very much about the issues with dogs that come from an environment like that. He had been a stray on the street, and he was picked up. He was left in the shelter. He had been hit by a car. So there were a lot of things going on with him. And when I got him, he didn't even bark. And my mom and I talked constantly about, why doesn't he even bark? Because he was really shut down, and I think he was decompressing. He had to have a couple of major surgeries, an FHO, and things like that. And then once I got him healthy, um, he literally, he was a different dog. And as my kids would say, I've grown, 3 grown sons, but they were like, oh my God, Wyatt has issues, right? You need help. So that's kind of how I started looking for a dog trainer. And somehow I came across Tug Dogs. I don't really remember how, but I remember my initial conversations with Aaron Kramer, the owner and lead trainer of Tug Dogs, were very, how do I say, I felt very supported because at that time, my 86-year-old mother lived with me. She was a little tiny Japanese lady, and Wyatt's behavior was so unpredictable that, I was really worried when I was gone that that he was going to knock her over or something, because she was always feeding him food and that sort of thing. But he had no impulse control. He had anxiety, and come to find out, he had separation anxiety as well. But I started out as a client with Tug Dogs, and I've never left. The help that I got through Aaron for Wyatt's behavioral issues kind of led me on a path to really want to help others. I'm very passionate about helping dogs with any form of anxiety, because that's what it turned out to be for Wyatt, was just this extreme anxiety. And I didn't even know dogs could have anxiety, but he did, right? And dogs that are just kind of generally fearful in the world, right? The world is a scary place for them. Those are the dogs that I really like to help. So today, I'm going to talk about separation anxiety, which is, the title and the topic of this particular webinar. I'm also going to make a small shift midway and talk about the general welfare of our dogs. They are captive pets, and what we are seeing in the training world is this kind of epidemic of behavioral issues. With dogs. We're seeing more and more dogs present to us with behavioral issues, and what we are learning when we're digging deeper through Tug Dogs has a pretty intensive onboarding process. But as we're looking into some of the reasons why these dogs are having all of these issues, is that there's some compromised welfare in the dog's life, whether it happened early in life or is going on right now. So I want to talk about a model that I have come across and learned through my LEG certification, my Certified Family Dog Mediation medication, which is the CFDM. It's a training program developed, or an informational ethology program developed by Kim Brophy, and it talks about the legs of both, mainly the animal, but also of the owner. So the leg stands for L for learning, E for environment, G for genetics, and S for self, like who that dog is individually. And this year at her 2025 Legs in Motion conference, she introduced her total welfare model that was just mind-blowing for me. And I've implemented it kind of subtly into a lot of the training that I do with the separation anxiety, and you'll kind of see it as I go through. I will also talk about the importance of resilience. We're asking our dogs to live in this captive environment without a really great skill set. And so teaching your dog how to be resilient and kind of navigating ups and downs of living in a very modern world that is very different than what they are used to naturally, or should have genetically and naturally. Resilience is really important if you can't get welfare to a certain spot that you need it right away. And then we'll return to working with separation anxiety and how I integrate these types of things, these two models, into my training. So some of the other letters, the Certified Separation Anxiety Professional Behavior Consultant, that's the CSAP-BC. And I'm a Kids Around Dogs approved professional. So one of my other passions is ensuring that kids and dogs are safe, and that kids know how to act appropriately around dogs, and that dogs can handle being around kids. Because I see both, right? Kids that are afraid of dogs or are inappropriate with dogs, and dogs that are afraid with children. So that's another passionate area of mine, being the mother of grandmother of 7 grandchildren. Okay. And I just wanted to share this picture of Wyatt. He is no longer with me, but I just wanted everybody to know who he was. Okay, so what it is not. Separation related behavior is complex, but it is not misbehavior. And I think with any of the kind of behavioral issues that we get presented with, many clients that are coming to us think that these behaviors that the dogs are exhibiting are, them being bad, when it goes much deeper than that. But I just wanted to start off with that because separation related behaviors is a lot of things, but it is definitely not misbehavior. Separation anxiety is also on a spectrum. So it can go anywhere from kind of confinement and barrier anxiety to isolation distress and separation anxiety. Within the kind of profession itself, there's not a common nomenclature for some of these terms. So I'll just kind of start out by saying I like to refer to things as separation related behaviors because I use separation anxiety to describe one of the forms of separation related behaviors. So for me, separation anxiety is when a dog has a particular attachment to one single person and nothing that we do other than the presence of that person will alleviate that dog's distress. Isolation distress, on the other hand, is the dog just needs a human around, right? They don't like to be alone, but they'll take any human with them. So those are the better cases that we can work with because we can incorporate family and friends and rover sitters right away. And then we have more kind of like smaller issues, confinement anxiety, barrier anxiety, where a dog just doesn't want to be inside the house if you're out washing your car or raking leaves, and the dog is kind of just watching you. FOMO sometimes falls into some of these categories, and even though it's not the exact same thing as a panic disorder, we do treat fear of missing out in the same way as we would approach a separation related behavior. And along that spectrum, right, I just kind of want to add that, I'm not naming everything here because I don't really know. Every dog is very different, but it includes any type of behavior where a dog struggles when he or she is prevented access to his or her person, or is left alone, or is somewhere in between of learning how to adapt from being completely alone to not being able to be completely alone. And it is a panic disorder, right? So your dog is not choosing to have these feelings. It is something that is going on with that dog physiologically, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, what are the signs? So we have the very visible behavior that a lot of people are probably familiar with: vocalization, destructive behavior, escape attempts, which is very common, usually the door where, or the exit where the parent or the person has left, self-injury, elimination, anywhere from urination, defecation to vomiting, pacing, trembling, excessive salivation, a hypervigilance, the anticipatory anxiety. So you may get up in the morning and know you're leaving. You think your dog doesn't know you're leaving, but you act very differently and you emit very different odors as you are getting ready to do something for the day. And your dog picks up from that. Their sensory system is so sophisticated that they kind of know when those things are happening. There will be a hyperfixation on you before you leave and cleanliness when you get back. Refusing to eat or drink is a very strong indicator that your dog is suffering from anxiety or separation anxiety. Any type of anxiety, including separation anxiety, compromises sleep routines. And we all know, even with humans or mammals in general, how important sleep routine is to kind of memory consolidation, solidifying what you may have learned during the day, positive experiences, physical repair, right, of your muscles. All kinds of things happen when you're sleeping. And so when you don't reach certain levels of sleep, your health is really compromised. And we do see this in dogs with anxiety and separation anxiety. And one that people don't see a lot, but I've seen it now a couple of times in some clients, is aggression toward the owner as the owner is trying to depart. So these are all kind of the very visible behaviors that might signal to you that your dog is suffering from some form of a separation related behavior. Then there's the invisible physiology, what you don't see. So your dog is in survival mode. Essentially, what happens is that your the brain of the dog has detected that there's a threat happening. And so the amygdala gets activated and there is a huge adrenaline surge because the dog is in fight or flight mode. And you have felt this yourself, I'm sure, when things have happened to you, or I sometimes feel it when I remember something that I was supposed to do and I totally forgot about it. But you get an elevated heart rate, an increased blood pressure, your breathing will become rapid or shallow. You don't see your pupils dilate, but they do to let in light, and your muscles tense up. And this is because your body is preparing, the body of the dog is preparing the dog to either run or fight. It doesn't know what the issue is. There's just a threat that's detected. If the threat persists, so you don't come back in the doorway right away, other areas of the brain join in, and the dog is in what we call a sustained stress response, and there's a cortisol release. And this cortisol, which we know even in the human world as the stress hormone, attempts to keep sustained energy by releasing glucose into the bloodstream, and it suppresses functions that in that moment are deemed non-essential. So things like reproduction, hunger, and most importantly, learning brain is deactivated in those moments. So with any form of anxiety or reactivity training, this is not the time to be training your dog because learning brain is turned off and your dog actually can't take in and receive the new information. And we can't change the way the dog feels about anything because this is happening inside of their body. It's important to note here that the intensity of symptoms is not necessarily indicative of the severity of the case. So you could have a dog that, for lack of a better term, shows a lot of drama when you leave, like barking and howling at the door and scratching. And then you can have a dog that is very kind of like shut down and kind of goes to the door and leaves his door right underneath the threshold and just kind of waits for you. But when you get back, right, there's a big puddle of salivation. Um, and you just know that the dog has been there all day long. Both of those dogs are experiencing the same thing internally. And so it's not an indicator to say, oh, this dog has a more severe case of separation anxiety. If your dog is showing pretty much any of the signs that we were talking about before, the internal stuff is happening, and you will want to address separation anxiety because your dog feels like they're trying to survive. And there are consequences for not addressing it. So a dog experiencing prolonged periods of stress is at risk of developing detrimental physiological and psychological problems. This is also true in humans, right? There's the onset of diseases, but especially to the heart and kidneys because of the type of hormone that gets released during the sustained stress period of time. High blood pressure we know is very damaging to the blood vessels in the heart. Stomach ulcers and gastric issues, chronic diarrhea or frequent urination. There are reproductive orders. Mood change, including an increased readiness for aggression, so it can have an impact on other areas of the dog's behavior. Interference with learning and memory, which we've just talked about. A dog could have a heart attack, and then there's cumulative psychological trauma. And what we know about trauma is that it actually changes the physiology of the brain. So the brain changes shape and it changes in the way it actually functions and processes things. So it's very difficult sometimes to get a hold of something and stop that cycle of, what the trauma of separation anxiety is doing to the dog. So it is really important that you address it. Aside from those things too, the damage to the human-dog bond is palpable. The dogs are at risk for potentially being subjected to punishment, which would be very heartbreaking, being rehomed, being surrendered to a shelter or rescue, or even being euthanized. The separation distress will permeate other areas of life. For example, the sleep deprivation that I talked about, and it will impact the existing behavioral issues and manifest in new behavioral issues. Again, it's just very important to address it. And if left unaddressed. So I know that this is all very, very complicated and it feels sort of scary to have to address it. But if you don't address it, what you need to know is the persistent panic will reinforce fear, right? Chronic stress alters neurotransmitters, and it reinforces the panic patterns. The dog obviously will have a reduced quality of life. You can't feel that way whenever someone is leaving, or just even generalized anxiety, and have good quality of life if you're always worried that something is going to happen. And all of these things kind of come together to reduce your dog's lifespan. And we know this to be true in humans too. People that live under sustained anxiety or sustained stress usually develop some sort of chronic or terminal illness, and their lifespan is shortened. So, we don't want your dogs to have a shortened lifespan. What causes separation related behaviors? I hope I'm not going too fast. I kind of talk fast when I'm kind of passionate about something. So hopefully I'm talking at a pace that is okay for everybody. What causes separation related behaviors? So there's not really a single cause, but there are many risk factors, and these are just a few of them. Genetics and temperament, early life experiences, such as being weaned too early or removed from the litter too early, a significant illness, maybe like parvo in the very beginning of life, or some trauma, neglect or traumatic separations, insecure attachment formation, which can happen with a lot of the rescue dogs, right? A lot of times we don't know how they got into the shelter, but we can assume that their first 6 months of life, if they're young, were not good. So these things that they should, these milestone things that should have happened with them brain wise, either didn't happen or happened wrong. The current attachment with the guardian also plays into the risk of separation anxiety, past instability, rehoming, shelter stays, frequent changes in foster homes, death and grief. So loss of a guardian or another companion animal family member, huge triggers for separation anxiety. A move to a new home, the arrival of a new baby or a new relative living in the house, or just a new roommate or a new pet can trigger separation anxiety. Inconsistent or changes in routines can trigger separation anxiety. Later life cognitive changes, we see a lot of seniors that will develop what looks like separation anxiety. It's actually kind of like the early signs of dementia. Pain, chronic medical issues, onset of new medical issues. So before we were kind of live, I was talking with everyone and letting them know of a webinar that I had watched with another veterinarian, and she was saying that up to 80% of all dogs who present with a behavioral issue, separation anxiety or otherwise, have some form of undiagnosed systemic illness or pain. So it's really important that we rule that out initially for any type of behavioral training that we're doing. Frustration can cause separation anxiety, and the modern world can cause separation anxiety, which actually places all dogs at risk. And that I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. So the relatives of separation anxiety, things that we see that kind of go hand in hand when we have a dog that presents with separation anxiety, are generalized anxiety. So they tend to be afraid of the world generally. Sound sensitivity and noise phobias, huge correlation with separation anxiety. And that includes the absence of sound, so silence. Motion or environmental based fears, depression, touch sensitivity, and heightened frustration. There are more, but these are just some of the more prevalent ones that we see. And then I really liked this kind of opinion or this quote from this Daniel Mills. He's a professor of veterinary behavioral medicine. He did a study right around, I want to say it was the COVID period of time. So I think it overlapped, kind of like it started before COVID and then spanned the happening of COVID, and I think the return of people to work after COVID. But he was one of the authors of this study. And I truly agree with him. After having done this now for several years, I truly agree that this is exactly what separation anxiety, how it should be looked as. Until now, there has been a tendency to think of this as a single condition. My dog has got separation anxiety, and then to focus on the dependence on the owner and how to make the dog more independent. He went on to say, however, this new work indicates that having separation anxiety is more like saying my dog has an upset tummy, which could have many causes and take many forms. And so both assessment and treatment need to be much more focused. And you can see in just what we've reviewed prior in the prior slides that this last kind of talk or words that he's saying is much more accurate about how I would explain separation anxiety to somebody rather than just this single dependence on the owner. So here is where I'd like to take a moment to zoom out and just talk about something a little bit bigger, and that is the welfare of our dogs. Okay, in nature, behavior is adaptive. So if you take that and you look at behaviors that are occurring that we are seeing in the professional pet industry, right? What is happening is that many of the behaviors that we're seeing in dogs result from the pressure of captivity, loss of autonomy, loss of ability to express natural behaviors, and loss of agency. Additionally, many of the behavioral issues that are presented to us are, in fact, natural dog behaviors. They are pain points for humans because the dog is living in captivity with us, right? So all on the bottom, you see digging, barking, perching on the couch, counter surfing, rooting in the trash, chasing, stalking, prey drive, pulling on the leash, wanting to explore their way. These are all natural dog behaviors that we get presented with as dog professionals as wanting to solve. The reality is that we should be facilitating these behaviors in a kind of in a safe manner, not just a free for all in your home, rather than suppressing them. I know that's kind of it might be a hard concept for people to grasp, but this is what the total welfare model is all about. So Kim Brophy, who is the founder and creator of the LEGS model and a proponent of the total welfare model, had this to say in her 2025 conference, and I just found it so profound that I wanted to share it with you. We are going to have to break free from the idea that our dogs are just pets, and we have to accept that it's simply unreasonable to ask them to be good dogs without us giving them a good life first. That's first and foremost, and then you'll see this kind of model that we're going to be talking about. But this holds more true for me. This second paragraph, it hits home a little bit. For too long, we've been actually training inhibition and suppression, redirection to unnatural behaviors, or over managing our environment or pharmaceuticals, frankly, to treat dog behavior problems, instead of applying the model that is already in existence for all of the other captive species of animals. So our new target as family dog mediators is to actually expand the behavioral repertoire of dogs through behavioral diversity. And I really like that because I feel like a lot of training, a lot of requests for training, this is what they're asking for. I don't think that they know that they're asking for it. And that's where kind of this total welfare model comes in. And the reason why I'm sharing this all with you, because I want to kind of get this information out there so that we can start thinking about things from this perspective. Exactly. So what are you trying to say, Rebecca? So what I'm trying to say, oh, that's a mistake right there. From the 5 freedoms to the 5 domains to the total welfare model. The 5 freedoms were developed in, I want to say 1940, 1950, and they were like freedom from hunger, freedom from thirst, freedom from pain. So it was kind of a model that was put in place to ensure that animals that we had in captivity, like agriculture, cows and that sort of thing, were not abused or neglected. So it was kind of bare bones, don't do this to the animals. And that morphed into what we call the 5 domains, right? Those domains implemented a mental or an emotional aspect to it, meaning not only do we need to do that, but we also need to add kind of more positive things so that the animal's mental state gets better. And it's now morphed with Kim Brophy into this total welfare model, where not only do we want to pay attention to the 5 domains, but we want to implement and enhance these 5 domains and incorporate things that make these domains rich to the dog into the dog's life. So, and this is what she was talking about. So this has always been put into place for dogs or for animals that are like in agriculture, and not necessarily ever applied to the pets. And here's another statistic that is kind of staggering. So I just read a study. There's something like 900 million dogs in the world, and only 20% of them live in captivity. And the majority of the dogs that live in captivity live in the United States, right? I think China was second, and then UK, I think, comes in third. So that's why in the United States, I think that we see a lot of these behavioral issues because a lot of the behaviors, they're not problematic in the dog's natural environment. They're problematic when we bring them into our home and we want them to live inside of our 4 walls. During consultations for tug dogs, I often explain to people, if you remember when you were little, right? If you had like a pet lizard and you had it in a glass aquarium, or your parents had a fish tank or you had a fish tank, right? You've tried to recreate these environments for these animals that you've taken into captivity. Essentially, that's what the dogs are, right? They're captive pets in our home, and our home is just a large aquarium for them. So, we want to we can do all of that we can to give them nice beds and comfort. And we'll talk about that as one of the domains in just a moment. But there's more that we need to do for them aside from making sure that they're comfortable. Domain number 1 is nutrition. I feel like for the most part, we do feed our dogs very well. And there's a lot of stuff on the market now that is healthier than just main dry kibble. And as long as we incorporate variety, and are not feeding them kind of like a no-name brand kibble that we don't even know where it came from, I think we're doing well in this state. But nutrition is really important. There's the gut microbiome, the gut-brain axis, and we know that mood and emotional regulation happens in the gut. So we want to be sure that we are supporting the gut with good food so that probiotics and prebiotic microbiome can actually do what they need to do. We also know that nutrients support brain health, especially in dogs that, prenatal dogs, babies, puppies, and as the dog is growing up. So we want to make sure that appropriate nutrients are given. And then on the reverse, poor diets create inflammation. And again, if you don't feel well, you probably won't behave well. And then adding variety, making sure that you give your dog some choices and some differences in food. And here's where I'm talking about the environmental physical comfort, right? We do a lot of things for our dogs in the home. They all have pet beds, pet cots, orthopedic mattresses. Um, One of the things I think that we could do a little bit better on, and I know that I can do a little bit better on in my house, is, routine and household dynamics, that sort of thing. Exercise, socialization opportunities are very important. Less confinement, less barriers, kind of giving the dog autonomy and choice to choose a bed to lay down, having maybe multiple bed stations where the dog can choose to lay down. And here's another one. I always say that it's a dog living in our environment is like a dog, it's like a human at a rave, right? So their sensory abilities are so superior to ours that noises, smells, sounds, and visual disturbances can create havoc for them. Their olfactory senses are the strongest, so noises and smell like room fresheners, cleaners, that sort of thing can make your dog feel really bad. A lot of our electronic devices in our home, our computers, connecting to Bluetooth, that sort of thing, they make sounds that we don't necessarily hear, but your dog can. And then the visual disturbances. I just learned that LED lights for a dog look like strobe lights. So I will be in the process of replacing most of the LED lights in my home with going back to the regular light bulbs because I know what strobe lights do to me and I don't want that happening with my dogs. Health. And I think this is another area where we are doing a lot better. I remember as a little girl, our dogs only went to the vet when something happened. If they got hurt or they came home limping, then my parents would take them to vet. There weren't these kind of annual yearly exams like that I do for my dogs. It was more reactive than preventative, but I think it shifted to be more preventative than reactive. And again, kind of going back to that statistic that I gave you, up to 80% of dogs with behavioral issues will have some sort of underlying medical condition or pain. So it is important to have frequent trips to your vet and have your dog assessed. Get your dog a baseline appointment where like you're taking blood, you're looking at certain things so that you do know when something is deviating for your dog and something is going wrong. Um, Oftentimes with the clients that are coming to us in Tug Dogs as part of our onboarding, we ask them to go get a comprehensive health exam because we want to rule out any medical condition that is contributing to hypersensitivity or reactivity or the not wanting to be touched, that sort of thing. So poor health and underlying medical conditions can trigger separation anxiety, other behavioral issues. Good physical health supports better emotional resilience, reducing severity of separation anxiety and other behavioral issues. And it's important that we, as with everything that we're doing with our dogs, that we are developing a holistic view of how we are treating them. And here we're talking about physical and mental health. So domain number 4 is the domain where we need to really improve what we're doing. By taking dogs into our homes and making them captive pets, we've actually taken away everything about them that is a dog. They eat what we feed them. They get medical care when we allow them to get medical care. They interact with other dogs or other people as we deem that they can. Any outside activities are basically controlled by us if they get to do them, if they don't get to do them. So this is where I think a lot of the behavioral issues, separation anxiety included, are emanating from is the dog's inability to do dog specific things and then breed specific things. So the inability to express instinctive behaviors. So we have multiple breeds of dogs and we have multiple breed types, like group types of dogs. Like we have hunting dogs, we have livestock guardian dogs, we have herding dogs. And when you bring those dogs into your home to be a pet, the things that they were genetically bred for usually aren't happening. The new guardian or the guardian wants them to be, calm in the home, not chasing kids around, laying on the couch, being a good dog. And so this suppression and inability to express instinctive behaviors has got to create a level of anxiety in the dog just out at the outset, right? And with the control too, they don't have the ability to problem solve, adaptively respond and react, interact with their environment, other animals or other humans, right? And we're always trying to control or manage what they're doing instead of letting the dog kind of think for themselves. We eliminate agency and rewarding interactions because now they're captive pets. And again, it's all about kind of this control that comes with captivity, right? But we want to have a dog have agency and rewarding interactions when the human is present, so that when the human is not present, that dog is not worried about the human is gone. If the dog has agency and rewarding interactions and has the ability to make choices while the human is here, it won't feel, without the human's involvement, it won't feel so lost when the human leaves. Um, and just as a trainer, behavioral modification programs should focus on enhancing positive behavioral interactions to build confidence and resilience. And at Tug Dogs, the organization that I do train for, we do build this into a lot of our training programs. We have little things called mood boosters, that sort of thing that we do incorporate into training. Okay, and domain number 5, which is the mental state, which is kind of where all of this culminates, right? All of the first 4 domains that we just talked about are the cumulative effect of the dog's mental state. It's critical to address and improve the 4 domains to improve this 5th domain. The dog's mental state is a core component of separation anxiety, as it is with any behavioral issue. So Erin says, and you'll see in one of the later slides, the founder of Tug Dogs, emotional health. If you don't have good emotional health, what good is training really going to do for your dog? Probably not a whole lot, right? Because the dog still feels bad internally. And I'd like to talk about resilience. As we're learning to be better about the domains with our dogs, we still need to train the dog how to be resilient, because until we get that dog to a certain level of good mental health, things are going to be happening that the dog is going to have to be coping with. And we want that dog to have resilience and the skill of resilience so that they can bounce back when things aren't going exactly as they want to. It's important for humans too to also have the ability to be resilient in situations. Okay, back to separation related behavior. So, coming at this from an ethological perspective and kind of the evolutionary perspective that I was just talking about, attachment behaviors, distress signals, and reunion are an evolutionary adaptation for survival. In a dog's natural environment, true solitude is rare and chronic isolation is unnatural. A modern world mismatch, so it's a maladaptive overactivation of a deeply adaptive system. So when a juvenile mammal gets separated from the adult group, they will cry for help. And that gives the adults the ability to find them and bring them back into the group, right? So you see this kind of with the dog that's kind of howling or vocalizing when their human leaves. But essentially, right, dogs are highly social, and it's unnatural for them to be left alone for extended periods of time. And we go to work, we have social events that we go to, and dogs can be left for an extended period of time in a captive environment. There's also, excuse me, an attachment dysregulation. The dog has difficulty managing its emotional response to separation from his or her person, right? Which is a manifestation of this kind of mismatch that I'm talking about up above, right? So the goal for me when treating separation related behaviors is that I should be focusing on helping dogs adapt to the modern social world, as opposed to trying to reach like a the client saying, I need my dog to be able to be alone for X number of hours, right? My goal is more to help the dog be okay in this modern world where the human does come and go, as opposed to working toward a specific time frame to get the dog there. Is Calculating time with safe absence is important. Yes, that's one of the main cores of the separation anxiety training, but it's not what fuels my goal, essentially, when I'm doing the training. Diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis. Okay, the diagnosis, it's either going to come from a virtual evaluation by a behaviorist, a behavior consultant, a behavioral history that we take from the client. And sometimes we get a professional vet referral because the vet is seeing a dog and the client has gone to the vet saying, my dog can't be left alone. You know, I need help. It's being destructive, or it ate something while I was gone, and I need help. So the dog will refer the dog to the client to a trainer. The separation related behaviors are multifaceted, so we have to rule out the other causes, as I've kind of been talking about: FOMO, canine cognitive disorder, and injury, illness, and or pain. So if a dog has like a terminal illness, it's very difficult to work on safe alone time. The dog is really not going to feel well enough to do that. And so we need to kind of figure out where the behavior is emanating from when we are formulating our treatment plan. Canine cognitive disorder is another one that's very difficult to really work on because it is a decline of the mental capacity of the dog. And so there's not like an improvement on the horizon that we can see where we can say we can start to begin on working safe absences here because it's just not likely going to happen. So these are the types of things that we have to rule out before we kind of engage in treatment and training. And then the treatment. So here's how I approach the treatment, right? The total welfare assessment. So I go through those domains. It's much more involved than what I showed you. Um, uh, you know, there's like these little checklists. There's what we call a behavior budget, that sort of thing, where we can tell where the dog lies on this behavioral budget and where we need to maybe add in the three kind of systems that the dog uses. I know I'm kind of talking vaguely right now because I wasn't able to show you that because it's pretty involved. But I do this total welfare assessment to kind of determine where deficiencies, gaps, and our unmet needs are in the domains and where I can have the client make easy, immediate improvements. Because oftentimes just starting this process, we get big gains from doing these little tiny things. And then the gold standard in separation anxiety training is desensitization, right? Getting the dog acclimated to feeling safe when they're alone and increasing the time in increments that the dog doesn't really know that we're increasing this time. And pretty soon we've gone from, you know, a dog that can't be left alone at all to a dog that's at 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and 8 minutes. And when you start getting into those higher numbers, it seems like it grows exponentially as well. We don't start introducing any type of departure cues until there is a good baseline of a pretty good length of time that the dog can be alone. 15 minutes is the lowest that I would start, but I like to have the dog be able to be alone for 30 minutes because I have to drop the time back once we start introducing departing cues. Because every time you increase the difficulty, and this is true for any type of behavioral training, anytime you increase the difficulty for the dog, you've got to give in another area. So I give where the time is, right? I reduce the time that the dog has to be alone. So it's kind of like camera, right? You have those elements of the camera where you adjust the f-stop and I forget all of them, but you know, it's kind of like this balancing act that occurs when you're adding difficulty. I have the client's data track, particularly uploading a video so I can see what the dog is doing and explain to them what their dog is doing. And I use the videos to create the next set of homework assignments that the client will be working on. And then building resilience. And I have a slide where I talk about how I implement the resilience rainbow into the separation anxiety training, because separation anxiety is one where resilience is really key, because that's what we're asking the dog to be, right? Resilient while I leave. So I'll kind of show you how I put that in there. One of the things that we do ask for, and sometimes it's impractical, but it is crucial, is avoiding absences or flooding the dog with absences. We actually ask that you suspend all absences and that you develop a community of people that can either come in and sit with your dog while you leave, so that the only time that the absence is occurring is under the very controlled environment of the homework and it's safe for the dog. If we can't get the complete avoidance of unsafe absences, I always have to explain to the client, I understand and I get it because I am training in a real world scenario. But I have to explain to them that training is either slowed or almost impossible if we can't suspend the absences, because that's just a key component of the separation anxiety training. Regressions, I talk about that too because they're normal. If you've ever worked with neurodivergent children or adults that are going through kind of like learning how to manage their neurodivergence, regressions are normal. And if I didn't have a dog that had regressions, I would be concerned. I would be like, is the dog just completely shutting down and, letting us just go, 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 go longer and longer and longer and really not acclimating to feeling safe when we're alone. So I like to see regressions. They're an important part of the training. And again, it's where we incorporate resilience, right? So everything kind of is an intertwining web here, but it's where we also work on resilience. Prognosis. Prognosis for separation anxiety training is actually really, really good as long as there's consistency from the guardian. I can't come into the home. I can tell you what you need to do. I can write your homework assignments, but I can't do the absences for you. I'm not in your home. Additionally, it's related to you and not to me. The issue is the relationship and the way the dog feels about you. But if you have a guardian that is consistent with the homework and is doing things incrementally, suspending absences, gradually increasing the safe time that the dog is alone, dogs will show significant improvement and sometimes full recovery over time. With this separation anxiety training, you have to think in terms of months and not days. And oftentimes, training goes on after the program with me has ended. So in addition to the goal that I was explaining to you before, having the dog be okay in our modern world, my second most important goal is ensuring that the client has the skill set that they need to keep going without me, because they're going to want to keep building. And the dog ultimately will tell you, this is the max. This is where I am. This is where I can be. And that's where we stop. The dog actually dictates everything, how soon we progress, how fast we progress, and at what level the dog actually reaches full duration tolerance. Okay, I really like this too, and I call this the collaborative trifecta. So we are often with separation anxiety working with a veterinary behaviorist or a veterinarian because, as I was explaining to you in the earlier slides, when your dog is in fight or flight mode and you have the sustained stress issue going on, your dog is not in learning brain. Nothing we do with separation anxiety training or even with any type of behavioral training has any effect. We can't change the way the dog feels about something if your dog is not in learning brain. And that is where a veterinary behaviorist or veterinarian can help with the prescription of medication, right? So as the behavior consultant, I'm designing and I'm guiding the treatment plan and I'm coaching. The guardian is implementing the plan, uploading data, informing me of what's not working and what is working so that I can modify my plan. And if we together, the guardian and me, see that the progress is really, really slow or it's just not even happening, I make the recommendation that they go see their veterinarian or a veterinary behaviorist to talk about some form of medication so that we can, I'll talk about it in the next slide, so that we can get the dog into learning brain. This trifecta also ensures that all of us are doing the right things and that there's not something medically going on with the dog that the guardian didn't tell me about, that the doctor will, the veterinarian will inform me about, and vice versa. So it's a collaborative team, it's teamwork, it's group, and it's a necessary component almost always in separation anxiety training. Very rarely do we not involve a veterinary behaviorist for separation related behaviors. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the learning brain that I was talking about and how pharmacotherapy helps, right? So the medication can reduce the stress or anxiety and prevent the panic to make learning impossible. It does not replace the training, it enables the training. We got to get your dog in learning brain so that we can show him what a safe, him or her, what a safe absence looks like. Because if we can't do that, then we can't even do the training, right? And there are many things that your veterinarian or behaviorist will talk to you about. SSRIs, they impact the system a certain way. TCAs impact the system a certain way. And the anxiolytics impact the system a certain way. Your veterinarian or veterinary behaviorist knows your dog from a medical perspective and is going to know which type of medication will most likely have the most success with your dog. I will say, 75% of the time, we do have to try multiple types of medication. So that entails a ramping up of a medication that the dog is initially put on, and then a weaning the dog off, and then a ramping up of the next medication that we put the dog on. Because what it boils down to is the way that the dog's body metabolizes a certain medication. So we've got to find that one that works. And I'll just share with you the reason why I'm so passionate about anxiety is because back in 2016, I had two very traumatic experiences happen to me within a couple of days of each other. I lost my boxer and I lost my mom. And it sent me into this kind of trauma situation where I couldn't get out of it because I was refusing to take medication. So none of the counseling that I was going to was helping or anything. So it took me four different types of medication to actually find the one that worked for me. But once I found the one that worked for me, it was a game changer. Like I will just admit it was a game changer. It took me 8 months to get to the point where I would even try medication. So, once I'm working with a client and I can kind of see just from experience that we're going to need to get medication on board, I do have the conversation with them right away because of these time frames to get the dog up and running on their medication and the potential if we have to change it or increase dosage. And again, the goal of medication is to just normalize your dog's neurochemistry so that we can get your dog into learning brain. Will your dog have to stay on it forever? I don't know that, and you probably don't know that right away. If we can show the dog what a safe absence looks like, we can and do try weaning the dog off of some of the medications to see if it stays, right? If it sticks, or if the dog needs medication. I know people that need medication all the time for their anxiety and depression. I am one that can kind of come on and off when things are really going really well in my life. I don't need them. I'm coping very well, but sometimes I need to get back on if I feel very overwhelmed and I feel like I'm slipping and my brain is not allowing me to use the things that I've learned in my counseling to keep me on track. And so I use it as I need it. And I think the same would be true for a dog, right? They may need it all the time. They may need it just intermittently, and they may be able to come off of it once we've shown them what safe absences look like. And assembling the caring community. This is actually really huge because separation anxiety can feel extremely isolating for the guardian. Having to never leave your dog or having to take your dog everywhere with you, avoiding family functions. I mean, it's really detrimental, some of the stories that I've heard about what separation anxiety with a dog has done to the family unit. It's a welfare issue for both the dog and the guardian. So getting your support group together, your online communities, and getting on Facebook is a really good place to start, right? They have these support groups, they have online communities, they have professional networks that you can join, right? It helps the guardian stay motivated. It reduces that feeling of isolation and hopelessness. You are sharing experience with people that are going through the exact same thing. You can trade ideas of what works. I always ask people to make sure that before they try something that we talk about it first because I want to make sure that it works with the plan that we have going on. And friends and family can be a great resources when absences are suspended because your dog knows them usually and they're comfortable with them. So it's not so bad when you're leaving and they're with, Aunt Debbie or your granddaughter or something, and they know who the person is, right? Sometimes it's even joyful for them to be visiting somebody while the parent is gone. Okay, so where do we start? We start where your dog can handle it. So for example, does your dog follow you all around the house? That to me means that I can't even start getting you out of the door until I can start having your dog relax when you're in the home. So we have a skill at Tug Dogs that we call Zen Spot that I initially start teaching, and then I will actually kind of evolve it into a place cue because I want the dog to actually be able to find a safe space with the Zen spot, and choose to go there on their own, and then be asked to go there knowing that it is a safe spot and that anything that occurs when I go onto that cot or bed is safe for me. And then we start working on the guardian being able to move around the house. But I have to start there if we have a Velcro dog and the dog doesn't even let the owner out of its sight inside the house. And then from there, we just build, and it is about building. And then again, as I had mentioned, once we get to a certain level of safe alone time, I reincorporate that individual family's departure cues. I break them down into little tiny segments that the dog can handle, and we start incorporating them into the training. We usually drop the time that the parents are away back down to a manageable level for the dog. And then we start building again with the incorporation of it gets fun at this point too. I say fun, because, departure cues usually are a lot of things, right? Putting your shoes on, grabbing your purse, grabbing your keys, wintertime, grabbing your scarf, going out this door, going out that door. So a lot of times the door that the parents use to leave is not where I start with in separation anxiety training, because from the data tracking that we do, I'm starting where your dog is going to be most successful. So if you can go to a door that you don't exit out of and your dog can be good with you getting to that door, that's not, I don't start with the door if you go out the garage door all the time. I start where your dog can actually handle it, because these little wins for your dog are confidence builders, and they just really help with the alone time. And then it's just practice, 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 repetition, 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 just like with any behavioral issue that we're working with, right? We can show you what to do, but you got to show your dog over and over again that this is safe and that there's no danger to you when you're doing it. And then resiliency. So again, resiliency, right? The ability to recover after experiencing a stressful event. So with separation anxiety, because we've eliminated for the most part, right, any unsafe absences, the stressful event doesn't culminate in like an overreaction or a breakdown of the dog. And you'll see kind of in my form where I'm using the resiliency rainbow to show you how I incorporate the safe absence itself. So it's a 7-domain framework. It's to be used alongside and not in place of other method of training, and it fits perfectly with separation anxiety training. And it builds and maintains resilience. And here it is. So if you remember, I should have put the rainbow in again. So all of these elements of the rainbow are in the color of the rainbow as they appear on the rainbow. So the first thing, right, is decompression. And that is the suspension of absences in the separation anxiety training. So we have to let the dog know we're not leaving you anymore. You don't have to panic anymore, right? We're going to let you decompress from this feeling of stress and this threat, so that we can move on to the next level, right? Then it's safety and security. That Zen spot that I was just talking about, we create the safe spot with that. And I usually have the guardian pick an area of the home where nobody's interfering with their dog. It's outside of traffic. Grandchildren aren't going to go there and try to pet the dog. When your dog is on the Zen spot, either by choice or by you asking for a place cue, the dog is to be left alone. It's a spot the dog can depend on to not be interfered with. We use the Zen spot also when we're outside with stranger danger training and we're trying to get the dog to be okay in other areas. It's a very powerful tool. It seems very simple when we're working on it, but it's super powerful. And again, the safety and security, right? We've been implementing safe absences, right? We're not leaving unless the dog can handle it. Completing the stress cycle is really important. So one of the things that dogs don't do when someone is not aware of separation anxiety, right, is this completion of the stress cycle. By having controlled absences and returning when the dog is under threshold, we are letting the dog have that stress cycle. The dog knows that you're leaving. It does have some initial feelings, but you're coming back before the dog reaches that kind of like that fight or flight or sustained stress, and you're coming back in. So the dog's like, I'm alive to see another day, right? So we are completing that stress cycle, which is very important for the dog and the brain. The mental and physical well-being, the next row of the rainbow, is that total welfare model that I was talking to you about. Before that came, when I saw that at the 2025 Legs in Motion conference, we did address it at Tug Dogs, not in this particular way, but we would look at what was going on with the dog. We would implement mood boosting exercises in our training. We did enrichment. We would recommend that the client did a lot of enrichment. This is just a more comprehensive um, method of doing that, and it addresses breed specific and dog specific behavior. Predictability. So the entire thing, right? Using systematic desensitization, keeping absences safe and under threshold, building duration tolerance. The dog can predict, I'm not going to be left alone. My parents are going to come back before I have a meltdown. And the dog does not know, but they're building their duration tolerance and are going to be able to predict longer and longer times away that their parents will come back. And the social support is embracing the community and the agency. So again, this kind of goes to that domain 4 in the total welfare model of um, giving your dog some agency and some choice, right? So this is being implemented in conjunction with the systematic desensitization, building safe duration, and creating and building confidence and creating a sense of control. So for example, polite leash walking is not something that happens in a dog's natural world, right? That's something that's a human construct that we want our dogs to do. So one of the first things that I tell people, right, is that let's let your dog choose the direction and speed of the walk. The dog doesn't necessarily need to be right here beside you. I don't want your dog pulling you over, but your dog doesn't necessarily need to be beside you. So if your dog pulls off to the side because he has a level scent that it wants to investigate, go with your dog and let your dog do it. A long line is another way to get this, right? Giving your dog greater distance from you and some autonomy and moving away from you. Very important with a dog with kind of like attachment issues, right? Having the dog being able to utilize the length of the long line to move away from you, because a lot of dogs that have separation anxiety stay very close to their owners, even when they're outside. So long line walks are also very important. And then I don't know how many of you have heard of sniff spots, but it's a lovely you have to look at them very closely and choose an ideal location, but it's where you can go with your dog. And when I'm asking a client to go to a sniff spot with a dog, it's with the intention of the client actually having no interaction with their dog. I tell them to bring your phone, bring a book, bring somebody that you can talk to that the dog knows. But when you get to the sniff spot, you are essentially letting your dog off leash in the area, and you're just going to let your dog walk. That's all we're going to do. They are rented, I believe, at an hour at a time for a very reasonable rate. And then when it's all said and done, you get your dog back on your leash and you go home. But during this time, your dog has sniffed, investigated, rooted, maybe dug a little bit, all of those natural behaviors that they don't get to use in your yard. By the way, when I have a client that says, oh, my dog is digging in my yard, my response to that is, we're not going to stop the dog digging. What area can we section off for your dog where your dog can dig to your heart's content? So those are the types of things that when we're talking about this total welfare domain 4 is the improvements that we want to make for your dog. That's just kind of a small example. And prevention. So prevention ideally would start early on, right? But let's just talk about how it would look for any dog, right? If you have an adult dog that doesn't have separation anxiety, or you have a puppy, right? You want to ensure the total welfare. You want to assess and reassess. And again, the items that I talked to you about didn't provide you with the tools to do the assessment. There's like forms, there's even an app that's coming out. But you want to assess, reassess, and repeat this all the time. Just because you reach a certain level of what you feel like is really good welfare, I'm sure there's always something more that you can do. And I always tell clients to start with maybe one improvement a month, because if you do one improvement a month, you have 12 in a year. And I can guarantee you, by the time you get to number 6, you're wanting to make these improvements because you're going to be seeing a different dog. So just starting with one a month is easy, it's doable, and I recommend it. Encourage and practice, primarily, ideally, early life on, independence with positive alone time experiences. In your day-to-day interactions with your dogs, avoid creating a codependent relationship. Let your dog move away from you. Don't have your dog making eye contact with you constantly. Don't have your dog only existing in your home based on cues, right? Let your dog make some choices and avoid these over attachment behaviors. You want to promote the autonomy in the agency, and you even want to incorporate a lot of play in your day-to-day interactions. Play is so healthy for dogs. One of the first things that we often see with dogs that present to us with anxiety or separation anxiety is that the dog does not play. And I will say that it's almost 100% of the time the first thing that a client sees improvement when we use pharmacology to get the dog into learning brain is that they start to see their dog play. And so I know that it's working and that the dog is feeling better. And then you want to provide enrichment, frozen toys. For this presentation tonight, I had ordered my dogs all of these bones from, I think it's called Mika and Sammy's. They're slow roasted smoked bones, and they're still, I can hear them. They're all still gnawing away, right? So I wanted them to be comfortable and, having their own thing to do while I'm doing this. Implementing structure, feeding them at the same time every day. Let them have predictability. If you've ever seen a child from a home where there is not a consistent routine or predictability, you see them struggling in many areas of their life, including school. And then building and maintaining resilience. Again, very, very important, this resilience part, because we can't recreate 100% how the dog would live in their natural environment. So we do need to have a dog that can be resilient to the things that are not natural to them. Okay, do you need a trainer? So I would say yes. If you're dealing with any type of behavioral issue or separation anxiety, it's complicated. And you need somebody who, is passionate about it and is every night I'm reading something about either dog behavior or separation anxiety. So I'm trying to learn all the time how I can be a better trainer for our clients, right? A lot of you are probably seeing, right? AI is out there everywhere. And I've seen multiple recommendations on Facebook for AI trainers. I think that those tools are helpful because they can give you what we know is standard, kind of like standard implementation that you would do when we're starting a training program, but it does not replace a human, and it does not replace the adaptability of human professionals to your particular situation with your dog. Any type of behavior modification requires nuanced emotional assessment that AI cannot yet replicate. I don't know that AI will ever be able to replicate it because I feel like that's that's the difference between a machine and a human. I just don't know. We'll see. But right now they can't. So yes, you do need a human trainer. Human guidance ensures ethical and compassionate care. Um, Erin came up with a golf analogy the other day when we were talking about AI, because I was talking to her about AI and the impact that it might have on the dog training industry, right? And she was like, I could have I've never played golf in my life. She was saying this to me. I have. I'm not very good at it. But she said, I could have somebody tell me how to swing a golf club, right? I can read it on AI. I can Google, in ChatGPT or whatever. How do I swing a golf club? It'll give you all of the steps to do it. But to actually get out there and do it and not have a human that is experienced in doing it, looking at what you might be doing wrong, you might be learning, right? And so learning wrong, it's harder to undo that than it is to learn right the first time. So having a human as opposed to AI in some of these more complicated matters, I think is really, really crucial. And if you're out there looking for a trainer, when you're seeking one, right, you want to interview them and you want to evaluate them and you want to do like a pros and cons sheets with all of the trainers that you're looking at. You want to understand that trainer's philosophy of training and their methodology. So for example, this is what I tell everybody in our consultations for tug dogs. We're brain over body trainers. We don't really care about what your dog's body can do physically because we can help your dog's body do things physically. We need good mental health, right? And so we are more focused on what is going on in the brain so that we can address the issues that you've come to us with, because the majority of them are behavioral issues. We don't have someone coming to us saying, oh, my dog doesn't do a perfect sit. How can you help me? It's more about my dog has stranger danger. My dog is afraid of being alone. And so you want to have a trainer that is compassionate in those areas and has a philosophy and approach to training that you agree with. Our methodology mirrors kind of exposure therapy training in humans. Again, we start where the dog can handle whatever it is, and then we build, build, build. All the while making sure all of these other things are getting taken care of, right? The dog's mental health. Is the dog sick? Like all of those questions that I was talking to you about that we look at as we're building. So, that's how we do it. And you want to make sure that you are in alignment with what you're talking to your trainer about, because it is a journey. It's not kind of like I do a lesson and I leave, right? I'm expecting feedback from you about your training and about what your dog is doing and how your dog is reacting, how you're feeling about it, because oftentimes behavioral issues are impacting the guardians as well. That's why we get the call, right? Usually it's crisis mode for the guardian. So just that's a little bit of a tip, right? When you're looking for a trainer, just make sure that you understand what methodology, what philosophy and methodology that they're learning, that they're using. And of course, we're here to help, right? So I think I mentioned it once before. Without, Erin has said, without good mental health, will training really even matter? So we are focused on your dog's mental health, brain over body. That's where it starts, right? We offer a complimentary three-dimensional consultation and onboarding process. I don't know that anybody that does this. And I kind of coined the term three-dimensional because we ask you to fill out a questionnaire, which gives us insight into how you view your dog. It gives us insight into you a little bit also, right? How you view your dog, how you view your dog's behavior, and kind of what you're expecting out of training. And then there's an in-person consultation. It's complimentary, where you will meet with either me or Erin, and we just dig a little bit deeper. And oftentimes most of the time, we're supplementing what has gone into the form. And we're taking that opportunity to start the mental shift about compassionate training with the client, especially if we have someone that's coming from an old school perspective. And then the third dimension, right, is we actually meet your dog. If it's only a separation anxiety issue, I'm meeting the dog virtually. We don't come into the home because it's not an issue. It's an issue with you and the dog and the guardian. So I don't need to come into the home. But if it's another type of behavioral issue, Erin is pairing that individual with one of our, we have a fantastic team. We have Sherry Raymond, who is certified in behavior consulting and dog training. She specializes in herding dogs. We have Julie Christensen. She's excellent with socializing and puppies. There's me. I like to work with the anxious dogs and kids and separation anxiety. And then we have Erin, who has, decades of experience, who's been in the industry long enough to see this morph that's kind of occurring. So it helps to also have that perspective and someone that can help change the mind of somebody who's coming from an older perspective. Erin also offers playful boarding for social dogs and custom care boarding. There are certain dogs with separation anxiety that can be boarded, right? And we do an evaluation for that. So, if you think that you can't leave your dog alone, I do recommend that you call for an evaluation for the custom care boarding. Some separation anxiety dogs can be left alone. But if you have a dog that's like dog reactive or has stranger danger, can't be in a kind of a commercial setting for boarding or in a social dog setting, that's another place where custom care boarding can give the guardian some relief from a dog with these very unique needs. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about Franklin. So Franklin is a current client that I have right now. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about him because I had a check-in with them last night. You can see over here, this is the beginning of their training session. I took these still shots from the video that they uploaded at their most recent session. So Franklin is he's very in tune with his parents. His parents are very in tune to him, and you can see them holding hands at the beginning of the session. I don't know if it's kind of like, we can do this type of thing, but it's a very beautiful connection, I think, between this dog and his guardians. And then there's Franklin over here. He's relaxed while his mom is out of the house. She has gone out the door. He has seen her gone out the door, and he is just relaxing. If you look at this mantle over here off to I don't know if you can see my cursor, but if you look to this mantle over here off to the right, when I did their evaluation, they barely could get down the sidewalk because Franklin was trying to muscle his way out of the door with them because he did not want them to leave him. And once they got the door shut, he immediately went to this mantle where all of his dad's expensive gaming remote controls were, and he got one in his mouth before I could actually send the text to say, come back, right? So there was zero safe alone time for this dog in the very beginning. And there's always hope. So there is a quote here from John and Annie and Franklin's parents. But with patience, commitment, following the science and support, separation-related behaviors are treatable. Dogs can relearn safety and develop confidence in other behavioral issues, including separation anxiety. Every small success for a dog builds trust, and every day brings your dog closer to safe and calm independence. And this is during my check-in with John and Annie last night, I asked them, I'm giving this presentation, what would you want to say to everybody about separation anxiety? And they said, well, we had been to another trainer, even sent Franklin to a board and train. He returned and we were hopeless. We did not see a way through this. With the training we are implementing now, we are at 20 seconds. I know 20 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but it is really huge. And we are very optimistic that we will continue to make progress with the structure we have been taught. So in closing, I would just like to say there's always hope for anxious dogs and the people who love them. Thank you.
Rebecca, thank you so much. That was informative and exceptionally thorough, and I'm just so excited that we had you today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to pass it along to Marianne here to go ahead and do some Q&A. I know we're running long today on one of the most important topics. No, thank you. It was fabulous information. So I'll pass along to Marianne for Q&A.
Well, the quick question is, will we get a copy of this presentation? So BirchBark does record them and put them on our YouTube channel. So anyone who, when the speaker is willing to do that, and thank you, Rebecca, for being willing to do that. So you will be able to, if you signed up for the webinar, you will get an email with a link to the entire presentation that you can see on the YouTube channel. And there's quite a few questions, but so I'm looking forward to hearing some answers. One of the first, and you touched on it because it was early in the presentation, say we get a puppy with a clean slate and we hope, how do we do our best? We hope we can avoid separation anxiety or tendencies. How do we do our best to minimize that with a new puppy?
So essentially, right, kind of that prevention screen, right? Just ensuring that your puppy does have alone time, not always carrying your puppy around, giving your puppy maybe an enrichment toy, a frozen enrichment toy where he's in. I often recommend pens at first for the puppy because when you're doing other training with the puppy, right, you don't want the puppy to have free reign of your house, right? Because you're probably potty training and doing all of the other things. So during those times when you have your puppy in your pen, go ahead and create I give a lot of people like frozen enrichment recipes, right? For Freeze Bones makes a really good product for making frozen treats for the dog. You can create your own recipe so you know what's in it, but give your dog something like that. And I would start again, right? Like inside of your dog. So there's a theme in meeting the dog where they're at, right? Starting where the dog can handle it. Dog can see you, right? And then slowly maybe moving the pen or moving yourself, to where there's like a little bit of a barrier between the dog and you and just moving yourself out of the way. The more important one, right, is not we all want to do it. I want to do it, right? When I have a cute puppy, right, is creating this like I want you to want me and I want you to need me all the time, right? And so that is I think that's one of the most detrimental things that you can do. If you want a very well balanced dog, you want your dog to be okay being alone and confident when you are not immediately in the picture.
Great. That's good. Good recommendation. Our next question is, can a dog with separation anxiety show aggression towards others when the owner is around?
So kind of back to one of the other slides, just the neurobiology of what is going on with the dog itself, right? When you're living in a sustained state of stress, the propensity for aggression is increased. So I would say the answer to that is yes. Whether it's actually related, I don't, we'd have to do a little bit more. Some of these questions will be hard to answer, right, without evaluating the dog and looking at the dog. But the answer is yes, it can be. And no, it might not be, right? It might be something different. It could be pain.
Well, and interestingly, the same person asked this a similar question, which is separation anxiety contagious? If one dog has it and is spending time with another dog, would that energy, and it sounds like the same kind of concept. It can, you create an energetic field and
Yeah. So I don't know if it's actually contagious, but I will say, right, teaching dogs to be confident on their own, right? When you have a multi-dog household, you have to train the dogs independently to be individual dogs. Again, that kind of codependency relationship, right? I need you, you need me, fosters those types of the onset of potentially those types of behaviors. So you do
Hmm,
want to teach your dogs to be independent on their own, right? And then bringing them together, just like you would if you see a lot of this like in twins or multiple births, right? The kids are very connected and dependent on each other, and they do everything together. Um, with dogs, you kind of want to make that, I wouldn't say discourage that with twins or human babies, but with dogs, you do want to create a dog that can be okay on its own. So again, the answer to that one is probably yeah. I could see how emotion is contagious, right? Um, and that could happen. So you would want to not work on that. You would want to work on that to have that not happen.
great. And the other two questions, one is well, I'm going to ask they're both anonymous. Is there a hope for a dog that has isolation distress who has already tried a full year of desensitization training with a behavioralist and is not improving with medication?
Um,
I think your presentation answer is probably.
yeah, and I think at this point I would be looking at other things. I mean, I don't know if this dog has had a full medical workup, right? I would start looking in other areas, right? Is there something medically wrong with this dog? Is the dog in pain? Is the dog fearful that, it's going to feel compromised when the human is gone? So I would start looking at some other areas. I would also potentially look at a different family of medications, talking to their vet behaviors about trying a different family of medications. Again, it took me four to get to one that actually worked for me, right? So, um, yeah, I would not give up just yet. I would, continue to look at some of the other things that I pointed out, right? What are the other things that could be contributing to separation anxiety? I don't know the age of the dog, but mental decline can look like separation anxiety when it's really not. Um,
Yeah, there's a parentheses with the number 5, so I don't know if that's the dog's age or not, but
oh, okay.
yeah.
Well, at 5, 6, 7, we are looking at things like pain, arthritis, especially if you have a smaller dog that's jumping up onto big things or a very active dog, a dog that, does agility or that type of thing. You would want to rule out those things and then potentially start looking at trying another medication.
Okay. And then our last question, and you may have touched on this, but and it may be a little bit of a challenge to really succinctly answer. But somebody said, and it was about 7 o'clock, so a little more than halfway through, they'd love to hear more of a definition of agency in the venue of your description.
Okay, so being able to choose what you want to do and have like a little bit of control of like the outcome, right? Like I want to go and sniff over here if I want to, right? We want to give that dog the agency to do that, right? To go over here and sniff that thing and not say, no, we're polite leash walking right now, so you're going to stay by me, right? So often we want to control every move that the dog is making, right? And like even just coming in from outside. I do it sometimes like, no, 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 they'll run right to my kitchen counter to see if there's anything that they can smell on there, right? But I want to stop that. But, one of the things that we want to do is kind of giving your dog some agency to do that, right? If you had a significant other that controlled every move that you made, you might be really, really unhappy.
And this is this is one just came in towards the end. Has getting another pet ever cured isolation distress?
I get that a lot. I would never get another pet with the assumption that it might, because you might get two dogs with separation anxiety, first of all, right? Secondly, then you've got to start that work that I was just talking about, right? Working with each individual dog, making sure that they're good in and of themselves, right? Um, so you don't want to create a problem that's not there. If you want a second dog because you want a second dog, then get the second dog, but don't get the second dog with the anticipation that it's going to help your first dog with separation related behaviors.
Great. Let me make sure there's nothing in the chat. Those were really good questions, and what a thorough presentation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
So much to think about.
Yes.
So, and our role in it too.
Yes.
Not that we don't know that, but it's nice to have a place to compartmentalize a lot of those details.
Yes.
So
Thank you so much for having me.
great.
I'll take us out. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. Rebecca, we can't thank you enough for being here. Again, if you weren't able to join us here, if you're watching the replay, let's see, how do I frame this? If you know someone who couldn't make it, feel free to let them know that the replay will be available on our YouTube channel. Please go ahead and fill out that survey for a couple of really fun little swag gifts from us. It helps us out. And if you'd like to donate to support more webinars, birchbarkfoundation.org. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to our webinar series in 2026 already. Oh my goodness. Everyone have a wonderful rest of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rebecca.
Thank you.